So I'll go ahead and call to order the City Employee Pension Fund Board special meeting of June 27th, 2023. And the first item of business is to approve our April 24th special meeting minutes. So I'll entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Councilmember Savigny. Thank you, Commissioner Hensley. And if you will take a glance at this, if you haven't already, and I'll entertain any changes or corrections or additions. Anything? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. Now, we're ready again to discuss the RFP for investment services. And I appreciate very much, I think Tammy and Aaron, who all was on this? And Samantha? Susan.
And Chad and myself.
Okay, very good. To bring us some changes. So would one of you want to walk us through Aaron, do you want to do that? Commissioner Hensley?
So the request...
Changes.
Yes, ma'am. The request was to bring forward a red line version of the changes to our investment policy, because the thought was we need to review and make sure we're comfortable with the investment policy before we put out a new RFP. After last month's, or the last meeting, some of the things that we were asked to take a look at were to update the general information at the beginning, which has been updated. We had some specific items that we wanted to note, such as we were going to prevent the investment in any kind of cryptocurrency type activity or anything similar to that should come. And then we had a conversation and did not necessarily land on a definitive remove the targets on page 8. And so they're still in there, but we are open to removing those, having had a little more direction. We just didn't want to take liberties when we weren't really sure that was something that the entire group was prepared to do. Short of that, we were asked to look and see if we felt comfortable in how the fund was invested. And so we took a look at this fund versus the Police and Fire Pension Fund, which I think that was a comparison that we felt somewhat comfortable with. And they're really not that far off from each other as far as targets. Specifically, nothing incredibly substantial. The big difference in the two funds is this one has the two pieces, the liability diffusing, which is completely funded, and then the return seeking. And so in trying to make a comparison of the two, there wasn't anything that really stood out as, hey, this is something we really need to consider, something we're not doing at this point. All of that being said, it would make sense if the board would like to explore other opportunities, that when we do write the RFP, we leave space for the responders to make suggestions, if they will, on how they might see moving forward with. I think we were only comfortable with the return-seeking portfolio piece. We want to keep the liability diffusing piece intact as it is.
Yes. So the change, you've marked all those changes.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I'll ask the board members to weigh in on the changes that have been made, and then I think we do need to go back and look at the targets for the return seeking only. So are there questions about the changes that have been made? Some of them are pretty perfunctory with the numbers and the
Just updates.
updated 2022 numbers.
Question, and you have
Yes.
to forgive me because I wasn't able to be at the last talk about this. So I see that it was last updated in what, 14? So as we've updated the numbers in the introduction, are we doing that regularly, or those haven't been updated since 2014?
I don't think we've reissued this since then.
Okay.
It's basically when we do a new RFP.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, that's all I have right there.
Any other questions?
I mean, there's only a few changes.
Yeah,
It's fine.
and they're really based on numbers
Yeah.
and dates and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So can we go back? I think this would be a good time to talk about the targets, and we had a pretty hefty
Yeah.
discussion about it last time. So this is on page 8 at the top, the asset classes within the return-seeking portfolio. And we had a good discussion, but we really didn't land on it, did we? Anything. So, and for those who weren't here, our discussion pretty much, and Dave, you'll remember also
Yeah.
some things to add, centered around whether we really, because we're in the return-seeking portfolio, which is not tied to the liability and the, paying the annuities, if we should tinker a little bit with the targets.
Yeah.
So what are your all's thoughts, members?
I'll give you my general thought is that the reason you have a liability defeasing portfolio, that's your guarantee, that's going to make your payments, we don't ever have to worry about it. The return-seeking portfolio should be really totally at risk. I mean, and if that's the case, and it's just, that's generally the way, because you've already taken care of, you already have a fixed piece of it in the liability defeasing portfolio. So that's just me. That's the way I run. And I'm actually even currently doing some of this myself. Like right now, it's kind of interesting, kind of putting certain things like way at risk, and other things that I need, that I know I need in the next 5 or 10 years in a different spot. But
For those who were not here, one of the things we talked about was just simply removing the target.
yeah,
You remember, but we would still keep a range in there.
yeah,
Any other thoughts or?
I will say, although I wasn't actually part of the work group, I did feel more comfortable knowing that the Police and Fire Pension Board had very similar ranges and or targets, since they're managed by a completely different fund.
Yes.
It made it seem like it was on track.
I do think that the money is basically taxpayer dollars, that's what we put in, and the employees' dollars. So it's a little different, I think, than working with your own money to invest. I don't know what you all think about that in terms of risk, but I'm always kind of aware of that piece.
I'm a little more apt to, I lean a little more conservative. I think it's our responsibility to grow this fund as much as we possibly can, and while taking risks is one way to think about it, I'm kind of a nervous Nelly when it comes to stuff. I don't like to bet too much. So, I mean, I would, I don't know. I just don't know if I would throw it all in the risk bucket.
In terms of the target,
Yeah.
which is we're talking about the
Yeah.
target now.
yeah. And one option is just to remove the target completely
Is that-
so that you allow professionals to actually make their own decisions. Because the ranges that are in there, it could be all 100% in
Yes.
growth assets, or it could be, they could move it around if they felt like it.
Does the police and fire, they don't have targets either? They have ranges only?
I think they have some targets. They're a little more actively managed.
Yes.
Than this fund, and one of the reasons that we kind of set these targets and left it alone, as I understand it, for this fund and this board, was because we didn't want it to be eaten up in fees. And so it's really more of a passively managed fund. It doesn't get anywhere near as much attention as the police and fire pension, and it's also closed. It's it's
Yeah, no one's putting in.
that's right.
Yeah.
So I think, the other fund has a little more maneuverability, if you will, and a longer time horizon. We're just not ever going to not have, police and fire and close that fund, ideally. But, I do think there's a little bit of apples and oranges here as far as that goes. And I think that has been the thought for this board. The board, since I've been here, which is only 3 years, has been very conservative on both the portfolio, the return seeking and the liability defeasing, regardless. And so, as part of the very small subgroup, that wasn't something that we felt comfortable making a recommendation, because it really is based on the feelings of this board, and that can change. So,
Do you feel like we may get more responses to an RFP if a target is not listed? Like, do you think people would feel like they have more, like they're not?
I think we're a unicorn. I mean, the fact that
We are
we're
definitely a
funded
unicorn.
is kind of amazing. So I think that, I would suspect that we will get a decent amount of responses.
How many we got last time?
I don't know do you know how many we had last time, Susan?
Over 10.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I think it.
So,
They, yeah, the closed fund and
This is a fairly
Yeah.
easy, like when you're not worried about actual payouts.
right.
Then you're, I think the more that we can bake in for their own creativity, maybe the better. And that's why I think just the ranges I'd be satisfied with. But
That's what I was thinking. I wonder if there's a way, even if we decided to leave the targets in, to say if there was some other option that they recommended to include that. But
In the
I-
RFP.
Yeah, I do think we have the opportunity in the RFP to say, this is our thought. This is kind of the basic guardrails. Tell us what you'd do with it. If this was yours to manage, what would you do with it? I mean, the comparison's going to be challenging because it's, again, going to come back to a philosophy of the board. What do we really want it to do? But I think they would tell you how they
For
would
that
do it.
purpose, maybe leaving the target in is a better option, just so they can kind of play with their
See.
option. Like they can say, I would
Make it.
I would take, I would remove the targets because you're always going to be disappointed, or whatever it is. Like, it'd be a good exercise to see how they respond.
So this is our investment policy. So I do think that if we want to say, our investment policy is here with and our target has been, this is what our target has been. If you want to differentiate from that, please provide your suggestions. But the question, do we want to change our policy? Or do we want to just allow for variation in the RFP? That was kind of how I've been separating it in my mind.
I like the idea of allowing for variation. I mean, you may have someone who sees a really good opportunity with a different target and may suggest that, or rather than change our policy. That's just my opinion. You all may have different opinions.
I don't know that we have a strong reason to change the policy, I guess.
I
is
don't
my
think so.
thought.
It's been working so far.
I have a suggestion. We can leave it
1974.
as is. And then if, once we get an RFP and we accept somebody and their suggestions are to change the target, then you go back and revise this with the new targets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Susan.
What do you all think? What's everybody else think? Anybody? I like the flexibility.
Yeah, I would eliminate the targets if it were me, just because then you're going to actually get them to, and if we eliminate the target and say, and you could say suggest a target, then it's something that we can hold them a little bit more to and let them kind of give us something. But I think if we put it in here, they're just going to, they're going to just hit that. They're just going to do that. Personally.
Unless we write it that way.
Yeah,
Because we make it perfectly clear that we're open to suggestions.
Okay.
I think that's what you were both suggesting, Susan and Aaron, isn't it? That we would want their ideas for what they think about these targets and whether they have a different idea. I mean, we could write that in the RFP, right?
I think I'm hearing you say, but if we put that, they're going to say, well, this is what they really think, so I'm going to write it in a way that they
Yeah.
will like
I mean,
it.
because to be honest with you, it's just math. It's actuarial returns. So they're just going to do, they're going to say, well, if you would like an 8% return on your portfolio, this is what long-term these numbers need to be. If you would like a 6, this is long-term what these numbers need to be. So does that, there's we're going to get kind of what we ask for.
I do think there probably is some risk to them if they feel like they're going out on a limb,
Yeah.
proposing something we don't want,
Yeah.
that they may just not.
Like to test.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, you're way too conservative. No, you're way
Yeah.
too.
There will
Too
be
risky.
that.
Maybe we
And
should
then-
ask them to suggest a target
Yeah.
in their response.
Yeah, that would be my thought, just because then it would be very interesting. Then you can actually, it just gives you a different way to evaluate the people.
And when you think about it, we've built in some safety net by putting the range in there
Yeah, yeah.
for each category
That's right.
of assets.
Yeah, and the range is big. So
Yeah.
they could be they could basically be all over the place. And I think we should probably, and I think do we have to let them know actuarially how long we think the plan needs to be remained open?
They will probably request our
Yeah.
most recent
Yeah.
actuarial studies.
Okay,
We'll just provide them.
Yeah.
Instead of
Yes.
having them request them.
yeah, okay.
And do we provide the policy with the RFP?
We had in the past. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
If we do take out the targets, we do have to let PFM know that we've taken out the targets, and we have to advise them on how they need to invest, because they're our current investor.
Yes.
So if we take out the targets, we've got to let them know, and then we have to advise them on what we feel comfortable with our targets being. Does that make sense?
So one of my concerns is on all these, the
Yeah,
real return assets and cash equivalents where we don't want any of those. So what do we do with that target if we take targets out? I mean, we've clearly said those are the more risky, right?
not necessarily. Real
isn't-
return assets could be real estate.
Well, we've never wanted that, right? And I don't know, this is a whole nother discussion, I think, for these 4 areas that are zero target.
I do think it's interesting that we put them in as a 0 target.
Right.
Like, why are they even?
Don't know why you would
Yeah.
Well-
Leave them out.
Yeah, why are they?
Yeah, why wouldn't we
Why is it
just leave them
The
out?
targets came from PFM. When we
Okay.
accepted PFM as our fund manager, they gave us the target.
They gave the targets. Okay.
Chad's not here, but I think that's where the targets
Okay,
came
this
came
is-
from. Was
Yeah,
from PFM.
and my guess is the cash equivalence piece is as they cash out of something, like there's always going to be this little bit of flush cash, right?
Yes.
I'm feeling like we should leave. I'm worried about the
I am
PFM piece
too.
of it, saying we don't have targets, but these are still your targets.
Dave, what if we decided to leave the targets in? What is the worst case scenario is it that we might miss some opportunities for,
I think this 40-20 and 40, like 40% fixed income is like, we're actually doing a disservice.
More of it
What-
in the year.
Yeah, like I just think that's a bit of a disservice to the future of, to the money that we're stewards of. By, like, for instance, fixed income was literally just 2 years ago was, like 1 or 2%, right? So I just think that's to me, that's a big number. And I think that they're going to try to keep to this target.
yes, I agree.
And so then I
Yeah.
think we've set something up. So that's why I would rather let them, I think our ranges create exactly what this portfolio should be about, which is them being able to maneuver, because this can be a little bit riskier than our liability defeasing portfolio. That's it. So
Is there a way to put the targets in? I don't know really what I'm meaning here, but change the domestic equity and the fixed income? Would that help us? I mean, the market and all of this is cyclical. It all changes year after year after
does,
year.
yeah.
So we can't try to guess the market, but I understand what you're saying about giving more leeway so that when one is way down,
yeah,
another,
yeah. Are we doing transfers between the two accounts? The liability defeasing and do we do a regular transfer between them?
I think that the liability defeasing for a significant portion of time has been able to cover.
yes,
Everything we've needed?
yeah.
Okay.
And so if I'm not mistaken, we haven't had to do a transfer
Mhm.
in quite some
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah.
really good.
I wonder if there was the understanding that this is our historical target for 10 plus years. It still leaves PFM with their instructions. I mean, I hate to think that someone wouldn't respond and say, there's a better way.
It's just such.
If they're, I see
Well,
what you're saying, I really
But
do.
They're taking a risk by just providing you a bid response. And so, I mean, when I would bid respond to things, I would always try to figure out the point system. I'd try to game it. I mean, that's just kind of the way bids work.
You don't think we can make it clear enough that we're really looking for targets to take us into the future, not
These are our
what we've
historical
been
targets.
doing.
I don't think so, but if we leave the targets in, we will have a very nice conservative set of bid responses, which is fine. Like, it's just totally cool. I just don't know that we're being the best stewards that way. That's it.
For me, what it comes back to is what does the board want out of this money? Not the liability defeasing, but the return
Yeah.
seeking, because we're not, do we want to grow it as much as we possibly
It's
can,
gonna
noting
help
that we're
somebody.
going to take a significant risk and we're going to see those fluctuations like we haven't seen? Or do we want to, slow and steady
Yeah.
wins the race type thing,
If we feel like we
It's-
still have 10 or 15 years, is that kind of like till the last person is in it?
67 is our youngest, Susan, is that correct?
So we have
So,
a
I mean, it's
potential
a decent time horizon.
of 20.
Average age is 82. The youngest
20 years.
is
20 years of life.
70, I can see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's,
I mean, literally, we could ride any wave. We could ride any wave. I can promise you. In
But
20.
we'd like to have a significant amount of money.
Yeah, that's right.
left at the end.
Yeah, and at the end of it, right, and towards, as we're getting actuarially older, like that, then that's when we could make
Change
it
it.
more conservative, because it's like, you're just gonna be like, okay,
Yeah.
like this, we could actually use it in the next 5 years, this may need to get dumped to the
To a new RFP.
the new thing, right? Or the new, because we can change our investment policy anytime we want, independent of this RFP,
yeah.
if, like, as that time goes on.
When is their contract, the current contract? Or are we not in
We
contract?
don't,
There's no contract.
there's no,
There's
we
a
don't
There's not a
have a
contract, okay.
I don't think there's a current.
And then how long before we would get, like, when do you think we would?
So
select?
ideally, we would come back every 5 to 6 years and look at it
But like on this one,
on this one as well.
but like, would this take, is this a 6-month process? Is this a?
For an RFP?
Yeah, for the
Oh,
RFP responses and us choosing.
I think we're probably looking at 90 days at the earliest.
For RFP release or getting everything?
No,
prepared?
I mean, I
to
think we,
get-
to get a
it
response.
back. So,
And if you pick somebody that's more, not as passive, but depending, because PFM is more passive in a sense, they don't move the money around.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get another company that may look at it more often, the fees are going to be higher, granted, but they're going to be more aggressive in looking at, well, you need to move your money into this instrument to gain more interest. So you're going to look at more fees too.
what do you think? You're the only one in here who is receiving an annuity, and I'd love to know what you think, if you have any thoughts on this.
Well, I'm inclined to give a little more flexibility. I don't know exactly how you do that, but I think that we should be a little bit flexible.
Mhm.
There are so few, if you asked every pension person, they would probably have a different thought or a different thing they'd want to go to, or they might not know what we're talking about.
Yes.
is the thing. But did I understand that there is no contract with the current?
That's
Are we
correct.
going to do a contract? Or?
So typically, when we issue an RFP, we issue it for a period of time. So it'll say for 3 years with an optional extension of 2 years if we want it to be 5, or 5 years with an optional renewal for a year or 2 years. So we would probably want to determine what that is and go back and look at it in that period of time.
I agree with that, yes.
Well, I like, Dave, that you did point out that we do have some time, that we could change this in the next RFP or
Yeah.
the next RFP.
Yeah.
I think looking at the time horizon that we have on this plan, if we're going to be more, if we're going to take more risk, it's probably not going to come
Yeah,
in our
later.
future versions.
Yeah.
We're probably going to want to be less.
Yes,
Yeah.
as we go along. Mhm. And that
So-
makes sense, really.
Yeah.
Historically, have we always had a target?
Since we created this document, this has been our target. Prior to creating this document, we did not have
This document.
this.
Okay, I've understood.
Yeah.
I do think if you just provide the ranges, and then ask them to create, and ask them their recommended target without giving them a target, it would be more interesting to hear their philosophy, right? Weighing all the factors, and then they basically could say, this is what our targets would be. We could literally amend this and create the target after the RFP is finished. We're like, yeah, we agree with that. And then done.
So leave these in place.
I would remove them, but that, I'm just telling you, that's what
I
I
don't know what, so to Susan's point, what does that do with our current investment?
If we take out the targets, we have to let AFM know
Oh, okay.
that there's no targets.
Yeah.
And advise them of,
Like we could say, just
Stay
keep
the
it invested
course.
like it is, like, is that how we?
that's my assumption,
Stay the
yes.
course.
Because I was talking to Roger about that, because we would have to let them know that we've updated this and the targets have been taken out.
So I would be good with that on the ones that actually have a target that's not zero. I need to understand for myself why we have some of these at 0% and what that represents. And I'm not comfortable including those that have a different target or no target until I understand them. And I think that's beyond this meeting, actually.
Would it look weird in an RFP if those were didn't exist? Like would the companies say, well, why aren't real
Okay.
return assets listed there? Why is that not something they're interested in? Like, would it look like something was missing?
Well, if we're not interested in certain investment vehicles, we just pull it out.
Yeah,
We just
okay.
say we're not interested in doing that. Instead, we don't want any cryptocurrency. We can
Yeah, I mean,
say the
then I
same
pull those
thing.
out.
If that's something that we wanted to do.
So how you do that is by taking those categories out? Is that correct? I
think.
don't know what all's in all those categories is my issue,
Yeah,
so
I
I
don't
don't
either.
know what we'd be pulling out.
I think if we just leave the category in, and if there's something that they find extremely beneficial in that category, they would propose it. That would be my thought.
And the board would have to accept it.
It's the same instance as Callan coming in and saying, hey, we think that you should invest in this instrument. The board has the option to say, no, we're going to pass on that. So leaving other in there gives them more flexibility to maybe offer something that they've never thought of before.
Okay. What other questions are there?
So I do think the target kind of goes hand in hand with the risk tolerance. We talked about splitting that out last time. Having a risk tolerance for the liability defeasing and having a risk tolerance for the return seeking and having them be separate. But with our targets, they kind of say the same thing. So we didn't make an adjustment on that. The subcommittee did not. If our philosophy changes, our risk tolerance changes on the return seeking, we may want to revisit that, breaking them out and say we're willing to take a little more risk. Right now it says we want you to minimize the fluctuations. That slow and steady type activity, we want you to do that for all of our money. If that is something we want to change, we probably need to call out the difference in the return seeking if we change it.
you would call it out in the verbiage?
We would probably put that little risk tolerance line. We would have a risk tolerance for liability defeasing and then a risk tolerance for return seeking. Right now, they're together because they're the same.
Right, right.
Okay. I would split them out.
You wouldn't?
I would split them out.
No, I agree
Yeah,
with
we
that.
talked about that last time,
Yeah.
but we just weren't sure what
I think
Right.
the
it's
return
important
seeking would
enough.
say.
It's important enough for us to protect the liability diffusing and call out our risk
Yes.
tolerance there,
Mhm.
which is not big alone.
Right. None.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe I'll just say that.
It
Risk
should just-
tolerance,
it should just
liability
say,
defeasing,
don't even think about
none.
it.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to word it for the other.
Well, this might be where our committee could bring us some language, rather than crafting it right here,
Yeah.
word by word by word.
I'm happy to bring language so long as I know the sentiment.
Mhm.
And that's where I was a
Yeah.
little stuck.
Mhm.
Well, you would say your risk tolerance is,
Moderate.
it is, is equivalent to the percentages of the asset classes, right? So it's, I would say, yeah, if we're moderate to high, moderate to, what's it, the word
We
just
do not want
doesn't
high in
sound-
there from my
Yeah.
perspective.
Moderate to aggressive.
With my own money, I might do that. but-
Moderate to aggressive on the one.
I think we need to leave enough flexibility in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
To allow them to
It's
invest in the way they feel is the most appropriate.
Right.
But
Yeah, because they may be
I don't
like,
want to give them like.
maybe like the market is
Free rein
definitely
over
going
money.
to hell. We gotta get out.
So, I mean, your options are seeks to maximize return on investment, which is most risky.
That is what it is.
That would be where you are. And then this, what we have currently, is seeks to minimize the fluctuations. We want it smoothed out. We want it slow and gradual. That's more conservative, moderate. And then
What's in the middle?
none.
Yeah, that's in the middle.
That's the middle.
That's the middle.
Yeah, that is the middle.
This,
what
yeah,
we
this,
have right
this is
now
a
in the
relatively
return.
conservative,
Mhm.
still growing, but slowly growing.
Mhm. Can you, so would there be anything between
We can try to figure out something.
aggressive and this?
Yeah.
Could you, that's.
It seeks
Sure.
to balance.
But you're you're gonna you're basically going to have two different ones, one for the liability and one for the other.
Right.
And I just think of the verbiage, if it says something like recognizing that we have, the funds and the liability defeasing portfolio to cover the actuarial requirements, at a very low risk, then this portfolio can
Be a little bit.
create balance by being
Yes.
more, whatever the word is that you want to use.
You wanted to say aggressive, didn't you?
I did want to say aggressive, but it's
Exploratory.
okay. It's okay. Use. Does that make some sense?
I like that. I like that. And knowing.
Just, it's recognizing, because I think people also need to, even the people that are on the pensions, they really need to realize that we have got them covered. Like,
Yes.
it is covered.
It is covered.
We got you covered. It ain't going anywhere. We're trying to do the best we can for the next group of people.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. What's everybody think about that? I think that to bring a new in-between language might be helpful. And then so are we to the point where we can What do we want to do with the targets? We want to remove them? Or in the RFP, I think someone suggested we could ask the respondents to reply to their ideas on targets or something like that. I don't know. What do
There's a
y'all?
way we could say, like, these are our
Oh, yes.
historical
Yes.
targets, but we are reevaluating our investment strategy.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? And that's giving them.
I like that.
And you
giving
could say,
them the-
based on this risk tolerance statement that we just made.
Yeah.
Like literally, it's
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
We'll have made a risk tolerance statement. So
I
let
think that
them,
makes sense.
let them say what they want to do. Then at least we'll also get a feel for the way they actually think.
Yeah. And we
Right.
don't want to remove our historical standpoint on it because that'll give them some foundational knowledge about us as well.
Right.
But we only started this liability defeasing portfolio with this statement that kind of came from our existing people.
Yeah.
Right? This wasn't the way it was. We didn't have a liability defeasing portfolio before we began with, what's her name, Jade?
With PFM,
PFM.
yeah, they
This, yeah,
They
this is.
separated it.
structured the two.
Yeah, so this
Yeah,
is
they
kind of a
separated
new
it.
concept.
Yeah.
And we want to continue that concept, so the RFP should,
Yeah.
like say, we want to
Yeah.
continue this concept.
I mean, I think it's to their credit that they did
Yeah,
separate
no, it's really good.
it.
I think it's a
So
great
that we
idea.
know we are firm on the liability
Great idea.
defeasing. Yeah. I am going to have to leave real soon. Do we think we're at a place where we could ask our subcommittee to come back with the language and the,
She's comfortable with it.
yeah?
Yeah, I was just playing with it. That seeks to balance growth over
Responsibly.
over the time horizon or something, I don't know.
Responsible.
Well, you bring it back to us and we'll tear it apart.
Awesome.
Well,
Not you.
and
I mean, you being the subcommittee.
Oh,
Yeah.
Susan's on YouTube. Yes, ma'am.
if you want, yeah, I'd help you with the,
No.
some real aggressive language. No,
Oh, boy.
no, just, it's okay.
Do we feel like you have enough to go to work on bringing those things back to us?
What I would also like to bring back, if the board is good with it, is a draft RFP
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that would be great.
at the same time concurrently. So if we
Yeah.
can get to a place where we're good with this, then we're, everybody's good with the RFP, we can just go ahead and
Is there anything we
send
need
it
to
out
vote
to the
on?
world.
I
Yeah.
I think we have, do we have pretty good consensus that
Yeah.
this is what we
Sure.
Yep.
like to have them bring back? Does everybody agree this is what we want them to do?
I do.
So, and we'll look for a date for when you think you can have this ready, and then we'll come back for another meeting.
And we're going to reschedule the July meeting over
Yes.
break. I think I've got a new date that I'll send out in the next
Okay.
day or two.
Okay,
Try to
good,
get that
thank
going.
you. Anything else? All
Thank you
right,
very much.
could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned, thank you so much to our subcommittee.